When we talk about achieving progress and stopping climate change, most of what we think about is creating laws or agreements on the national or international level to stop fossil fuel emissions. And don't get me wrong, this is absolutely necessary if we want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, but it is not everything. A lot of change happens at a local level. For example, more and more cities are adopting climate action plans, which outline how they are going to reduce emissions and transition to a greener path forward. One such plan is up for a vote on May 6th, and it's a big one. In El Paso, Texas, which is a pretty cool city with great food, charm, and scenery, early voting has already begun on the El Paso Climate Charter, or Prop K, which hopes to create a just transition to a green economy and effectively combat climate change. Some of the provisions of Prop K include creating a climate director and climate department of the city government to focus on lowering the city's emissions, creating a climate commission to recommend environmentally beneficial legislation and make sure the city is keeping to its climate goals, and measures to transition to renewable energy, conserve water, prepare for the impacts of climate change, and create new jobs in clean energy. The charter would also implore the city to find a way to municipalize El Paso Electric, which would give the city more control over its transition to renewable energy. Put simply, this charter would make it so the city has to consider the climate impact of all its decisions and work to decarbonize. This all sounds great, so what's the problem? Well, there isn't really a problem, but the charter threatens fossil fuel interests, so they're inventing problems. Firstly, the El Paso Chamber of Commerce announced that the charter would cause 170,000 people to lose their jobs. This number comes from a study the Chamber of Commerce commissioned from an Idaho-based firm. Strangely, the Chamber has not released the study or even explained its findings in detail. These claims of job losses have also been disproven by third-party independent groups. Look, the loss of jobs is a big issue to consider when transitioning to renewable energy. This is why the transition must be done with justice in mind. And the El Paso Climate Charter does this. If you read the charter, which I've linked in the description of this video, it's clear that it prioritizes the creation of jobs, not their elimination. In fact, the Climate Charter would require the city manager to create an annual goal for the creation of climate jobs. So unless the Chamber of Commerce can back up its baseless and disproven claims of mass job loss, this is an invalid point. It's also worth noting that the El Paso Chamber of Commerce has strong and direct connections with the fossil fuel industry, which is why it's taking this anti-climate legislation stance. There are also groups that claim that the charter would just be reckless government spending. But come on, we're already seeing the devastating impacts of climate change, and it will only get worse, especially in a place like El Paso, which is already dealing with drought and extreme temperatures. Unless we drastically reduce emissions, by 2050, El Paso is projected to experience an average of about 37 days per year of temperatures over 101.6 degrees Fahrenheit. This is up from an average of only 7 days per year above those same temperatures between 1985 and 2005. The Climate Charter would help the city minimize and prepare for these impacts before they occur, saving a lot of money and potentially a lot of lives. So yes, Prop K costs a lot of money, but it is not a waste. Also, Prop K will not raise taxes for El Pasoans, though many opponents falsely claim it will. And again, the main groups making these false claims are funded by the fossil fuel industry. For example, the Consumer Energy Alliance, a leading opponent of Prop K, is funded by some of the nation's largest utilities and oil companies, such as ExxonMobil, CenterPoint Energy, and the Texas Oil and Gas Association. And the largest donor to the opposition is El Paso Electric, which wants to keep extracting and selling fossil fuels to El Paso while giving the city minimal alternatives. Finally, some are saying this will cause energy bills for El Pasoans to skyrocket. Once again, this is plainly false. This is because renewable energy is already cheaper than fossil fuels. And it's not like El Paso is going to have less overall energy if the charter passes. What will happen is renewables will go online as quickly as possible, and as this happens, fossil fuels will be used less since the energy demands of the city will have been met by the renewables. This charter is incredibly important. If El Paso can pass it, it will be a huge step in the right direction and will show other cities what is possible. But the opposition is campaigning hard since they are bankrolled by the industries this charter would regulate. So please do what you can to spread the word about this plan so we can counter the misinformation. And if people are still wary of the benefits of this charter, just tell them to read it. When you read the actual document, it is clear that adopting it would be for the best. You can also read the other sources I've linked in my description if you're still unsure. If you want to help more, I've also included a text bank that you can join to help get voters to the polls. Also, I highly recommend looking into what your city is doing. Many cities are looking into adopting climate action plans, and many have plans that aren't ambitious enough. So get involved locally and make sure your city is taking the necessary steps to combat climate change. The Sunrise Movement, which is behind the El Paso Climate Charter, has local groups across the country working on similar projects. 350.org, another climate change action organization, also has local groups working to create change. Volunteering locally is one of the best ways to get involved in the climate movement because it is accessible and influential. So please look into it and do what you can to spread the word about the El Paso Climate Charter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.